intro. Yes, you can introduce yourself. I think you're going to be better at that than myself. So if you want to say a few words about you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, good morning, good evening. It's morning here. I'm calling in from Silicon Valley. I work for a tech company called LinkedIn, and I'm guessing most of you have your profile on our platform. And I am going to talk to you today about two things. One, what is the big picture globally in terms of how the economy is turning green, and what does that mean for you? And then I'm going to wrap up with a few just practical tips about approaching the job search to find green work based on what's happening on LinkedIn. So if we go back to the first slide for a minute, this is the main message I want you to remember. If you don't remember much else from today, the earth is hiring. We see tons of activity, and it's increasing on our platform with regard to people building green skills, people finding green jobs, and people publishing great insights as thought leaders in the green economy. So that's exciting, I think, for you to hear, even with some of the headwinds faced right now in the renewables sector with wind and with solar, with supply chains and permitting, et cetera. The trajectory over the long term looks very promising. So that's the main message. If we stop for a moment, it's important to realize we are living in a pivotal point in time. And I think because you are all, dialed into this call, you realize that the scale of the transformation that has to happen and the speed at which that transformation has to happen is unprecedented in human history. And I'm so, happy that you have sort of raised your hand by being part of this masterclass to say you want to be part of the solution. The planet needs people like you right now to really double down, build your green skills, find the green work. Green skills and building those is not just an admirable thing to do. It's a very smart thing for you to do for your long-term career path, because it'll open up opportunities to green jobs, but also it'll expand the definition of how you can do green work. You can do a normal kind of business job in a green way, and that's probably the most important transformation that has to occur. So how does LinkedIn determine how we can be part of this fight? Every company has to decide two things. How are we going to shrink our own carbon footprint? And how are we going to use whatever resources, assets, products that our company offers to the world to help other companies and other individuals go green so that we can scale our impact? That's what I do every day in my job. I'm the director of global sustainability at LinkedIn. So half of my team focuses on our huge, ambitious climate pledges. We've said we'll be carbon negative, water positive, and zero waste by 2030. Not 2040, not 2050. So I have two steercos across the whole company with our data center team, our workplace team, our sourcing team, our customer-facing team, really to look at every way that we can reduce our negative impacts and make progress on that goal toward carbon negative and the rest. The other half of my team says, how can we expand our impact beyond our own four walls? So I have people working with our product team to develop a green taxonomy, which we've done. And that unlocks a lot of functionality on our platform and our products for all of you. What I'm going to focus on mostly today is one of LinkedIn's truly unique assets, a truly unique way that we can contribute to enabling other people to do greener work faster and more effectively. And that's what we call our economic graph. And as I'm looking at this slide, I'm realizing the first image there has to be updated, because last week we just hit the 1 billion mark in terms of number of members. So I will update that. But all of you who have your profiles on this site, 65 million companies who have pages telling the world what they're doing and who they are, lots of schools. And then we have all these tens of thousands of skills that we've cataloged And we've tagged some of them as green or supportive adjacent to green skills. And that's the richness that we have that I'm going to dig into now for a few minutes with you. So let's first talk about green skills. And that's really where we've anchored our focus. And that's because that enables us to help you understand what green skills are becoming increasingly in demand. It enables us to look at different labor markets and say, what does the demand for green skills look like in, Europe versus the supply of people with those green skills? And so we can inform policymakers and business leaders. And it also helps us paint the picture about green work opportunity more broadly than just job titles like mine, because there's a lot more opportunity to do green work beyond the relatively rare positions like mine to be, director of sustainability. So first thing, and I know just from having read some of the background about the masterclass and also what the student energy folks are going to present, that one thing that people are a little confused about is, what are green skills? What does that really mean? So I love it that you're doing a Slido. So LinkedIn took our time. We talked to many outside experts, and we are kind of leaning into a definition from the Environmental Protection Agency in the United States. Green skills are abilities and or knowledge a worker can use to prevent, monitor, or clean up pollution, and that's air, land, water, that includes climate emissions, and to optimize the stewardship and conservation of natural resources. So we came up with 12 categories of activity that either prevent, manage, monitor, report, clean up. It's the whole spectrum of moving away from fossil fuels into clean energy and into a more circular economy. It includes skills that people in traditional green jobs like mine, or someone who's working for a solar panel firm, have, plus skills that people would use to do their regular jobs in a greener way. And think about that from the standpoint of sustainable fashion, which happens to be one of the dirtiest industries, but sustainable fashion skills were the fastest growing green skill on our site last year. And you can think also sustainable investment, and that is really, on the radar right now too, is all the skills around green bonds, green internal carbon fees, green investing, ESG funds, all of that stuff. So it's a very wide net that we're casting. That's because every job in the end has to become a green job, and we want to help to enable that. And one interesting thing for y'all to think about is when we look at the skills profile for, what you have up on your site, what you're on the LinkedIn site, and then the job postings that we have, the skills profile for the average job posting changed 30% in the last 8 years. That's massive. That means that, jobs postings that in the past wouldn't have called for any green skills, now those job postings are asking for them, because green skills are some of the newly added skill requirements. All right, so the first resource that I want to point you toward, because I don't have time to go into all the rich detail that's in it, you can just go online and download LinkedIn's Global Green Skills Reports, last year's 2022 and this year's from 2023. And that will give you a lot more information about green skills by geography, by industry, what's growing, what's not. It's quite an interesting read. We have an economist on staff and a whole bunch of data analysts. So that's the first thing I can tell you. But the headlines are encouraging for you, I think, but concerning for the world. Number one, the supply of people across the globe with green skills is low right now. Only 1 in 8 people who have their profile on LinkedIn list or indicate somewhere that they have a green skill or more than one green skill. So it's far from where we need to be, because if organizations like mine are going to make pledges to transform their business and shrink their footprint. We need people inside our organizations who know how to do that across every industry. The second data point is demand is growing. So just in the past year, LinkedIn job postings that now require at least one green skill grew by a median of 15%. That's impressive by itself, but it's even more impressive when you realize that that period of time, job postings in general on LinkedIn were not growing. So the ones with green, looking for green skills grew, much faster than the average. And then, the other good news is that if you do have green skills on your profile, what we see statistically is the workers that have at least one green skill that they're signaling, they're getting, the hiring rate for them is 29% higher than the average. So that's a lot of momentum. Now let's look at it from another angle of concern, right? The growth in demand for people with green skills is outpacing the increase in supply. And you just look at this statistic, 12% of green talent in the workforce versus the share of job postings looking for someone who has some green skills. It's almost double. So that's just sort of a call to action. Companies like mine, how we're responding, we have launched 100 new courses on LinkedIn Learning to help people who sort of in their kind of regular jobs want to do them in a more green way. We have, courses ranging from fundamentals of sustainable supply chain management to what is ESG to sustainable product design. So it's that's one way we can help address this gap. And then the other thing is we're launching a course in January for our company for all employees, and it's a Sustainability 101. So no matter if they're in finance, sales, marketing, data center, they'll at least they'll be internally at our company with our existing workforce, like a baseline knowledge of sustainability. So every day when they're making choices, they'll make them in a greener way. Okay, let's dig a little deeper into green skills. So if you look at the text that's highlighted in green, those are just a sample of green skills in our inventory. So one is a knowledge about climate change. One is driving energy efficiency. Another is renewable energy. Of course, within renewable, there are a lot of sub skills related to, creating that renewable energy, distributing it, measuring it, reporting it, driving efficiency, all of those things. So you can look there. Those are like just a selection of green skills. And then what we see is the job titles underneath each of those skills are where we're seeing they're showing up in job listings. So a utility manager, of course, has to be concerned about energy efficiency. And if you look at renewable energy, there's a whole range of types of jobs where you have to have an understanding of that and where that fits into your job. We can share this deck so you can have a look later. And then let's just look at it from the other way. What I was calling regular job titles, business analyst, ops manager, salesperson, software engineer. You can take a moment to just look and see when we have those job listings now on our site, what are the skills that are, sort of embedded now as prerequisites or nice to have preferred criteria for people who are applying. And again, you can have a look. The two reports I mentioned from LinkedIn have even more information. Okay, so that's the green skills landscape. Now let's talk about trends we see on our site in terms of hiring and what we call green hiring. And remember our definition. It's not just job titles like mine, sustainability director. It's hiring that's occurring with job postings where there's a minimum number of green skills that are included in the job posting. So let's just have a look. And this also should be encouraging for you all. So just look at the axes are the difference for green hiring versus all hiring. That's the y-axis. So it goes from 0 to 45%. And then if you look across, that's just time. But let's focus on the right-hand side of the chart. You can see, the US, UK, etc., some of the countries that are on this call. The good news is that none of them are at the average rate, which would be the flat line at the bottom. All countries, the green hiring is outpacing overall hiring, and it's really gone up in the US, UK, France, global right there is 20% higher. So there's more stats like this in the Green Skills Report. But, I think that's a reflection of a couple things. One is the increased regulation that's occurring, not just to report, like the EU's CSRD reporting that's going to be required for carbon footprint in the states. The SEC, the Security Exchange Commission, is asking for comment right now about increased climate disclosures. Where I'm sitting in California, which happens to be the 5th largest economy in the world, our governor just signed 2 bills for companies of a certain size. They have to measure, report publicly on carbon footprint and also on the risk that climate presents to their company's long-term health. All those things are spurring hiring. And then in addition, I think that just the extreme weather that's been happening over the last year is definitely now convincing some people who may have been skeptical that the time is now to do something. And then I'll just mention something that might be relevant for you. The older generation is being influenced now by young people like you. And I'll tell you anecdotally, I report regularly up to our C-suite, to our CFO, chief legal, chief marketing. And 3 of the 8 execs have said to me in the last year, like, I really am realizing now, even more, we need to just commit everything we can with our company to, attacking climate. And they said it's because at the dinner table, their teenage or college daughters or sons are asking them, Dad, Mom, what's your company doing? What are you doing? Why aren't you guys moving faster? This world you're giving us to inherit is not acceptable. So there's a lot of forces happening, and I see student energy folks are nodding, but it's all part of this momentum. Okay, so good news for you as well, because I know renewable energy is the most focused. What we really see is more and more workers are being hired for renewable energy types of jobs. So between, I'll just let you read this, but for the last 8 years, employment in renewable energy grew. For every 100 people who left the global renewables, 120 joined. So that's a net, gain of 20. And the growth has been far faster than growth in the oil and gas industry. And then, it's not just happening in renewable energy, though, in the fossil fuel sector as well. People working in the oil and gas industry or being hired in, increasing proportion of them have had to have a subset of green skills. And so I guess it's super interesting to have this slide up right now because COP28 just launched. And, in the keynote, the head of COP28 from the UAE talked about, the importance of fossil fuels being part of the total puzzle through, 2050. I think that, there'll be a lot of blowback against that as the next 2 weeks unfold. But you need to make sure your voices are heard and that we just keep adding the momentum here. Okay, the other thing I wanted to flag, it's great, our data can spotlight, and I'll let you look at the right side of this slide. Basically, if we just let things unfold with business as usual and the normal networks to play out, then it's not going to create a juster future. So we really need to address the gender gap. Only 62 women for every 100 men are green talent right now. So let's ramp that up. The age gap, people like me are slower to adopt the green skills than the younger folks. That's no surprise. And then the other thing is, the gap between how broad is the on-ramp for people with just a high school degree versus graduate or, bachelor or graduate degrees. Okay, so, I hope you don't mind. I just thought, because, since like 9 out of 10 employers uses LinkedIn at some point in the hiring process, This is not intended as an advertisement for LinkedIn, because there are a lot of other good avenues, climate specific job boards and stuff. But I just wanted to give you some tips if you're using LinkedIn in terms of the job search. And one of the new LinkedIn learning courses we have from Climate People, Natalie, this is part of her pitch, is dive in head first, just go for it. But be specific. Think about which sectors are a passion for you or where your skills transfer would be most naturally helpful. Number 3 is the most important one I'm going to drill into, which is network. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. Number 4 is what I did when I was moving back after 12 years in Europe in 2015. I didn't have my network in the States. I wasn't sure what the job landscape looked like back in the US. So I basically went on to LinkedIn and found 5 jobs that would be my dream job, and then kind of created a spreadsheet and said, okay, these are the skills, this is the knowledge they're looking for. Where are my gaps? If I want to aspire to those jobs, what gaps do I need to fill in? And then, create a timeline and hold yourself to it. And then there are ways to go in and search in jobs to come up with green jobs. I know we're running out of time. Okay, build your professional network and connect to jobs. I cannot emphasize that enough. There are 1 billion people on LinkedIn that you want to know, some of them, and you want to make sure they know about you. There are groups on LinkedIn. And think of it broadly. So, when you think about your network, you might think about people you know directly and you have, a track record with. What we found through looking at the job hiring activity on our site is that the 2nd and 3rd degree connections, it's the people that you know deeply who know someone, or even one level beyond that, those people, when you are connected with them on LinkedIn, that opens up their whole network to you. And what we find statistically is those tend to be the people that end up being more important in ultimately landing your job. And then there's the impetus for networking, and it cannot be all take and no give. You have to be feeding your network, share your insights, share your thoughts, help them connect, write a referral for someone you've worked with. Adam Grant wrote a great book, Give and Take, that I recommend. But the people who are most successful are the people who are givers. And that's in life in general, not just in your job hunt. Okay, and then some additional tips I'll just let you look at for a sec, and then I'll wrap up. I'm done. And I will stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Peggy. Super informative, and thank you for keeping to the time. I think this is really good news for candidates. I wasn't aware the numbers were looking so good for those that are looking for jobs in this sector. And it's really interesting to know also what LinkedIn is doing, both externally, which is more expected, but also internally. So kind of tackling both of those fronts. I think that's interesting to know. So now I'd like to open up for questions, because also Peggy will have to leave in a few minutes. So this is your shot to ask burning questions, because I think she'll have to leave just a few minutes. So, are there any questions right now? Feel free to drop them on chat box. If for some reason you can't speak right now, feel free to open up your camera as well. Any questions? Well, I do have a question if no one else has a question right now, Peggy.
Yep.
I'm just looking at some numbers. I was looking for them right now and I can't, but I'm not going to waste time looking for them now. But you basically touched on that point, is that demand for these skills and for candidates is very big. And so there's going to be a massive gap here now and in the coming years. With basically consequences to development of projects, keeping timelines, but also keeping quality standards, right? Because if you're rushing through, if you don't have people working for you stable, and you have to outsource all the time, so this is gonna create issues in terms of the quality of the projects implemented. And now I'm thinking more about renewable energy projects. What would you advise companies to do to sort of tackle this problem? Of course, this is not just something that companies can do by themselves, but what would your recommendations be?
For renewable energy companies or for
In
companies in
general,
general?
I was the numbers I had in mind were more for solar, but yeah, more generally.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so from where I sit in my company, I'm telling my company to buy only clean energy. We have a goal by 2025 that we will be accessing clean energy, either on-site installations, which we're doing at headquarters, or through power purchase agreements, because the numbers. It's the cost has come down so drastically. So that's one thing. I mean, when companies think about how they address their carbon footprint, there's really two big factors. Scope 2, which is electricity use. So, support clean energy growth in any way that makes sense for your company. But then there's Scope 3. And so a big effort that we have is engaging with our supply chain to help them access clean energy, because if we're going to continue to purchase product for them, that's one way that we can help. And so our parent company is Microsoft, and they have a large energy procurement team, and so that's one initiative that we're doing. So I don't know if I'm directly answering your question, but I'll tell you where I'm thinking very parochially of the United States, but the largest concentration of data centers are in Virginia, in the state of Virginia, and it has one of the dirtiest power grids in the United States, unfortunately. So as data center capacity keeps getting built out there, the electricity, source is not clean. So we're advocating at that state level, and looking at other places to cite as well that have cleaner grids. So it's just kind of thinking about what actions your company is taking that either support growth in clean energy or, the opposite, proliferation of dirty sources of electricity.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Open up again for questions. Are there any? Feel free again to drop them on the chat box, or just turn on your microphone and ask away. I saw Tara was about to. If not, then we will move on to our next.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good luck, everybody. Thank you very much.
So we will move on to our next speaker. So now, after hearing a little bit about what companies are needing and what the job market's looking like now and in the future, which I think is quite interesting, it's also interesting to know now what students are expecting and wanting from the future in terms of this sector. So over to you, Student Energy, Brett and Piper. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us today. And thanks, Peggy, for all the insights on green skills. Hi, everyone. I'm Brett. I'm coming to you from Edmonton, Alberta. I'm joined by Piper, who's coming from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. We're members of Student Energy, and we're going to be talking to the Energy Transition Skills Project. A little bit about Student Energy. We are a global charity that works to enact renewable energy projects led by youth around the world. We have a number of different programs that we'll speak to a little bit more in depth that can help you to develop some of your green skills if you're interested in getting involved. And we also have a very diverse research portfolio that focuses on global trends. When we talk about the Energy Transition Skills Project, this was a project that was focused on identifying what barriers and opportunities youth are seeing around the just transition and opportunities to work and grow their careers within that space. It really focused on answering the research question, how can energy actors align with the needs and aspirations of young people to meet the workforce demands of the energy transition? Through the course of this project, we spoke with more than 1,800 youth globally about their needs, where they're seeing barriers and where they're seeing opportunities to grow within the sector. And we're really excited to be able to share some of, some of their perspectives today with you. In terms of the scope, you can see here we had responses from around the world. About 2/3 of all participants identified as a member of a minority community, which we'll get into a little bit more in depth further on here. And about 3/4 of respondents were located in large urban centers, and then 1/4 were in smaller, remote, rural communities. I hope that if there's three things that we'll be able to offer through this conversation today. The first is for any youth who are on the job hunt in the green sector, you can start to identify opportunities for you to advance in your job hunt. You'll be able to do some of that kitchen table advocacy for anybody that you know who is leading in the sector. You can be advocating for overcoming the different barriers that youth are seeing, as well as the opportunities that they really want to pursue and what they're seeking in roles in the sector. And then lastly, some of us are going to go on to become CEOs. Some of us are going to be entrepreneurs. We're going to be leaders within the sector. Understanding the barriers that other youth are facing globally is going to be really important for creating an inclusive space and a well-rounded employment sector. So hopefully we'll all be able to take away some of these learnings and instill them throughout. Now, in terms of those project findings, in terms of the career opportunity priorities for youth, we saw across the board there were 3 top priorities. The first was seeing a purpose of their work. In a very close second was the importance of salary and compensation. We live in capitalism, so everybody needs to make some money. And lastly, seeing opportunities for growth was the number 3 piece, or the third overall priority for youth thinking about their careers moving forward, especially in the green sector. Some of our key insights as well in terms of the barriers that youth faced. About 1/3 of all youth were interested in work that supports the energy transition, but they weren't aware of which jobs existed and how they can get involved. I really loved what Peggy had to say about using LinkedIn as an opportunity to start to understand the job market. I myself follow a number of people who post sustainable jobs all the time, so you can be looking to your network and more broadly on LinkedIn. There's also a number of job boards, as Peggy mentioned, that you can be looking for some of these sustainably focused jobs. About half of the youth surveyed said that they had a lack of awareness about those existing job opportunities being a barrier to their employment. If you don't know about the jobs, it's pretty hard to apply for them. So seeing opportunities to broaden your perspectives and seeing opportunities for the sector to become a little bit more focused on advertising itself as well is a key opportunity there. And lastly, 2/3 of respondents believe that skills training programs would help them to pursue the energy transition jobs they're interested in. Really focused on some of folks leaving post-secondary education, leaving their secondary education, not feeling equipped to step immediately into a role. And this speaks to the needs for programs for people to be upskilling, as well as the need for us to be advocating about improving education globally to better align with labor needs. Some of the insights in terms of the barriers that were identified, there were 3 top pieces listed by youth. The first is a lack of access to skills training. The second is a lack of awareness around existing job opportunities. Oh, sorry, I flipped those. It's lack of awareness about existing job opportunities, and then a lack of available entry-level positions, and lastly, access to the skills training that's needed. Again, awareness and then the skills to be able to apply it. I really liked what Peggy had to say about the breadth of green skills and how they can start to align to more traditional skills that we would see in a professional setting. So just taking that spin on it as you're thinking about your own professional skills, you can start to align it in more of a green skill focus center. And how did youth identify that they could start to learn those necessary skills? The top 2 answers, the first was skills training programs, and the second was internships and work to learn opportunities. A little bit later on, we'll speak to some of Student Energy's programs and how you can get involved with them if you're interested in taking part in some skills training and looking at opportunities to work to learn. And finally, some last global insights. About 1/2 of the workforce in 2022 required additional education stepping into their role. So one thing that this speaks to is that traditional education doesn't equip everyone for the roles that they'll be stepping into. And it also speaks to the need for better scoped entry-level positions as we're thinking about how the sector can be updating, ensuring that there's opportunities for people to step into roles that don't require 2 years of experience as an entry-level position is something that's really important for us as employers to be thinking about and for youth to be advocating for globally. Moving on from some of these global insights, Piper's going to take it away to speak to some regional findings.
Awesome. Thank you for passing it over to me, Brett. You can, yeah, perfect. Thank you. So what we're going to dive into are a bit more regionally, looking at first, what are the most important priorities that youth identified when we surveyed them that they're looking for when they're looking for a job within their region. So we'll kind of look at just a couple different regions and actually see what some of the youth in our network are looking at. So next slide, please. So first, we're going to look at the region of Europe. And so you can kind of see down here, it might be a little bit blurry, but youth in Europe identified that the purpose of work and the ability to make an impact was the most important thing to them when they were looking for a job. It was about 33% of youth that we surveyed that identified this as their top ranking priority. And so, for instance, when we look at our Student Energy's network of global youth, we can kind of see this to remain true when we look at our European regions. So for instance, we have a chapter of the University of Groningen, and if anyone's from the Netherlands, and I'm not saying that right, apologies, my chapter always pokes a bit of fun at me, but in the Netherlands, the chapter, every year they host an annual symposium, and this is the event and the project that they host, that they funnel the most resources into, and it's something that they're working on all year round. And most recently, in April of 2023, their symposium was focused on impacts of global events on energy and energy transition. So for instance, they looked at political, social, economic, natural disasters that impact the energy sector, energy transition from across the globe. So they looked at the war in Ukraine, for example. They looked at global policy on fossil fuel emissions. They looked at policy on nuclear, et cetera, and how that would impact the energy transition and how their community can maybe get involved. So they really focus on kind of making an impact, educating and engaging their community. That's something that we found has been really important to youth in Europe, and that's something that we see true within our own network. Next slide, please. And it's interesting to kind of compare these two to other regions. So for instance, if we're looking at Southeast Asia and the Pacific, what we'll see is the top identified priority for youth in this region that were surveyed for when looking for a job is opportunities for growth. So specifically, working in government was the second most commonly identified answer as what their ideal job in the energy sector would be. It was about 16% of youth in Southeast Asia and Pacific identified this as what was really important to them and what they would hope to get a job in. And again, these trends are coming true when we look at our youth networks. So for instance, our National University of Singapore, they focus a lot of their resources on sending different youth delegations to events and conferences that are happening, connecting youth to a larger network, really focusing on the networking aspect of where they can get involved within their region. So for instance, this picture on the left is some youth delegates from the chapter who are attending the UN Economic Commission for Asia and Pacific, SDG7 forum. They also had a delegation of youth recently who attended the Singapore International Energy Week. And a big event that they focus a lot of their resources on is a career fair. So they're looking where they can invite people from the government onto their campus and help engage their local community and the students on their campus and look for more opportunities for growth. That's really what we've seen that they're seeking to identify as their top priority. So next slide, please. And now looking at this graph that just shows a couple regions and the barriers to employment in the energy transition, I think it's really interesting that we can some assumptions that we can draw from this compared to the top priorities. So for instance, if we're looking at Europe, we're seeing that lack of awareness about existing jobs and maybe lack of available entry-level positions is their greatest concern, or what youth we've surveyed are identifying as the largest barrier. And this kind of makes sense why the events that the student and youth in this region want to host are just to aim to increase their impact and their ability to make an impact on their community. They feel like they have the required skills training. So now they're looking to kind of dig their heels deeper and create this impact, versus if we look at Southeast Asia and the Pacific and the barriers identified, it's not entirely different, but you will notice that lack of access to skills training is a lot larger compared to Europe. So it again makes complete sense that youth in this area are looking for more opportunities to grow rather than having making an impact being their greatest importance and what's their priority. So just some trends that seem to align. It's not just coincidence that this is what's going on in these regions. It does all seem to make sense and come together if you look at how these graphs are interacting with each other. So next slide, please. And lastly, something that Brett kind of touched on that I think one of our key things that we want to draw from the presentation today is just to talk about quickly is our University of Calgary chapter. So this, for people who may not be 100% aware of the context of Canada, Calgary is in Alberta, and Alberta is the largest producer of oil and natural gas in Canada. So the energy, or the conversation around energy, is extremely relevant, as it is everywhere, but especially in Alberta within Canada. And they had, from their chapter, they had a delegation of youth attend a roundtable with the Honourable Minister Wilkinson of Natural Resource Conservation Canada. And something that they were there to do was to advocate for space for youth, especially specifically related to brain drain in the energy sector. But what they said was they read the energy transition skills report, and when they went to this roundtable, they used it to back up their facts. They used it to draw attention to specifically to this opportunity that they had to talk to government and say, look, this is what youth in our region are identifying as a barrier to energy. This is what we're identifying as what we're looking for. And they really they use it to back up their arguments. So this is something that we want to encourage all of the youth who are listening to this, who will listen to this, is to go through the project, and we'll talk about this a bit more in a second, but to go through it and really find what remains true and what is clear in your region, and how you can use that to advocate for yourself in these spaces. So I believe that next slide, I will be passing it back to Brett to talk about gendered and minority insights.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Piper. Yeah, the Albertan context, I'm here in Edmonton, Alberta, so it definitely is one of interest to me. And seeing those reflections from the University of Calgary just got me a little fired up in a good way. Another component of this research focused on gendered and minority perspectives within the just transition. One of the key focuses within student energy is ensuring that we create an equitable space for all youth to thrive. And we wanted to understand a disaggregated perspective on the energy sector and growth within it. So focusing first on the gendered perspectives, what's actually quite striking to me about the priorities that folks had based on their gender is that they fairly well align together. You'll notice the purpose of your work and ability to make an impact both for men and women is their top priority as they're considering their career. And then once you get into the second and third rankings, then things stop being as directly correlated. Now, one thing that I'll emphasize, I'll just mention right off the top here, we did have respondents who didn't identify on the gender binary. They were, I believe it was 1.9% of respondents, and we didn't want to draw conclusions based on their perspectives because they were a statistically small group. We didn't want to draw incorrect conclusions based on that. A key takeaway from the gendered perspective, as Peggy mentioned, when you think about representation within the energy sector, you do see a lower percentage of women in the sector. As people progress through their career, through the stages of their careers, from entry level to management to senior management to executive levels, you start to see at those transitions, gender representation steadily declines, and you see more and more men taking up space in those spaces. So one reflection that I have on this is how can we ensure within the management spaces of our employers that the purpose of your work continues to be highlighted of high importance. The second priority for women, salary and compensation, ensuring that those salaries are competitive, and then starting to think about opportunities for growth as kind of that third priority, especially to support gender representation moving forward. Some other priorities that we focused on, we asked respondents if they identified as Black, as Indigenous, as a person of color, a member of the LGBTQIA2S+ community, as well as a person with a disability. And what's kind of surprising to me from these results is how well aligned they were to the majority groups as well. Notable outlier for me is under the Indigenous column. The purpose of work and ability to make an impact isn't the #1 ranked priority. Job security and opportunities for growth come in ahead of that for that specific group. The reason why I focus in on the Indigenous group for student energy are programming, the 7Gen Summit, as well as the Imagination programming, which is catered specifically towards Indigenous youth on Turtle Island in the country we call Canada. Those are the programs that I work most closely with. And as I'm going to be working with them, I'll think about some of these insights and working with the Indigenous youth who are leading those programs, I'll try to instill that job security is a top priority for those groups. Opportunities for growth are top priority, where other aspects of our work, we might focus more on the purpose and their ability to create impact, just ensuring that we're catering to the needs of these groups and understanding really where they're prioritizing different opportunities within the sector. Shifting from some of those priorities to different barriers that are faced by minority groups, the top 3 identified barriers across all groups, and this includes non-minority youth, was a lack of access to skills training, a lack of awareness about existing job opportunities, and a lack of available entry-level positions. So this speaks to the need for those skills training opportunities, as well as shifting how traditional education and how traditional entry-level positions are framed in the energy sector. What's noteworthy here is about half of Black and Indigenous youth identified the lack of skills training as a barrier, where only 40% of non-minority groups identified it. So there is still a gap that exists there. Another key reflection, LGBTQIA2+ youth, Black youth, Indigenous youth, and youth with a disability identified workplace discrimination as a barrier to their employment. This was twice the number of non-minority respondents. And lastly, 40% of respondents with disabilities identified insufficient salary as a barrier, and it's only 25% for non-minority groups. This is a bit of a standout, thinking about trying to engage folks who have disabilities, trying to engage other members of other minority groups. If that is a specific priority that you would have as the leader of an organization, you can be seeing where are these barriers and where are the priorities that those groups have, and really tailor your offering to those youth as you're trying to employ them moving forward. And you can also be using this information to advocate on those groups' behalves. As a member of a majority group myself, I certainly will try to take some of this information and instill it in our programming and instill it in the advocacy work that we do. So in conclusion, we have a few recommendations. I'm going to fire off a few for energy actors to take. The first is to align job opportunities with the priorities of young people. Consider purpose of work, salary and compensation, opportunities for growth as top line priorities, but also dive in a little bit deeper, understand the different groups and their priorities. You can be thinking within specific regions as well. Make it clearer which skills and knowledge are necessary for young people to enter their career. This also speaks to the need to have training and growth and development for young people. So make more entry-level positions available to youth and develop youth skills training programs. You can be working internally with your organization to develop those skills, as well as partnering with other organizations. And I'll touch on that in just a second here. And lastly, the fourth recommendation for energy actors is that employers must develop strategies to support diverse youth to enter the energy workforce. This is focused on understanding the barriers that they face and what their priorities are, and catering to their needs as specific groups. If there are any employers in the audience who would like to invest in their skills training, you can reach out to us and sign up for Student Energy's Career Training Program. This is a 4-month program. You get to work directly with youth globally. If you're a youth who would like to work directly with energy employers, you can also sign up. Reach out to us. We'll put you in touch with the SEC team, and we can go forth and do great things. And Piper will have some recommendations for the youth in the audience.
Awesome. Thank you, Brett. So the first thing to do, or that we're really encouraging youth to think about, and this is something I am 100% thinking about as well, is really important to lay the foundation of your climate action and your career in passion. Like, what are you interested in, even if it isn't directly related to something that seems obvious in the energy sector in the realm of sustainability, and then find ways that you can tie it to that. So for instance, there's a really interesting climate action Venn diagram by Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson. She's a really cool marine biologist, and she has a TED talk on it. You can check it out, but she draws it out very clearly to identify what are you good at, what do you care about, and then what in the energy sector do you want to work in? Because that's the only way that your action can be long-lasting and sustainable, right? It's really draining working in this sector sometimes, so making sure that it does align with also what you're passionate about is really important. Being able to clearly articulate the transferable skills that you have is really important. A lot of people have so many of these skills, but we just don't know how to talk about it and how to really link it directly to a job. So for instance, what Peggy was talking about green skills, so many of us have green skills, maybe we just don't know how to list it on our LinkedIn or how to talk about it explicitly. But to make sure that you can look at the experience you have and draw any connection that you can to how you can support that in your career, any time in the workplace. The third recommendation for youth is to advocate for energy transition skills in your own communities. So we're not saying go join a new community, go talk to an audience you've never interacted with before and talk about the energy transition skills, but really to just where do you have your hand in already? What community are you already part of? Is it your work? Is it your school? Is it your church? Is it the sport you play after work? Whatever it be, these are places where you can start to advocate for it. You never know who might be already existing in these communities. And so to make sure that you are talking about this within spaces that you are already existing in. You don't have to make the work so much harder for yourself, but you have to at least be willing to start talking about it and really to make it a conversation that you're having with people regularly. And then lastly, to actively reach out to people in the job and in the industries that you want to. This relates, again, really well with what Peggy was talking about just connecting to people, looking for those opportunities for skills training, for an ability to make an impact, etc. Specifically, if you are looking for skills training, like we've been mentioning a couple times, student energy programming, it's all free and it's welcome to all youth global between the ages of 18 or 30. So we're always looking for new people to join our programs. We have a fellowship program, which is open right now. There are two tiers. If one, you have a project that you're working on that you want to take to fruition and really develop it, or if you want to just learn about project development, the applications are open until December 8th. We're more than happy to share the links to those after. Guided projects and careers training programs will be opening in 2024. You can find information on Student Energy social media, as well as our website, and then our Student Energy Chapters program, which I talked about briefly about all of our chapters in Europe, Southeast Asia, all over the globe. I'm always excited to read new expression of interest. So those we accept on a rolling basis. If you are a post-secondary student and you want to start a chapter and build a community of youth interested in the energy sector on your campus, you're more than welcome to apply. And with that, next slide, please. We just want to say a big thank you to everyone attending and showing up and listening in. The research team that did most of the work for this was Shakti and Megan. Megan's moved on to her master's, but you're more than welcome to reach out to Shakti, as well as if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Brett and I, and check out the Energy Transition Skills Project. It's linked here. We can link it in the chat. It's on student website. You can find it anywhere. So again, thank you so much, and it was lovely chatting with you all today.
Thank you so much. It's really, really interesting to get all this information. I recommend that you also have a look at the report, which contains a lot more information that obviously Piper and Brad could not go over. So I think it's a really, really interesting report and really gives a detailed overview. Together with Peggy's presentation, really paints a really comprehensive picture of how we can move things forward from both ends. There was a question on the chat box. I don't know if Student Energy, do you want to take it on? And then maybe we invite Anna to say a few words if she wants to. The question was, and I can read it, I was wondering if there is any insight on differences on the results when it comes to just transition regions, meaning the ones affected mostly by the fossil fuels phase out. Are there more job opportunities, for example? I think this is a really interesting question, especially considering that this is the focus of the project that brought us here. So if you want to take this on.
Sure. To give a brief answer, and there's so much that can be said around this. One, there's a lot more information related to this specifically within the Energy Transition Skills Project. I can't speak entirely to job opportunities, but there are 1000% more opportunities to engage in conversation. It might seem like the areas that have already transitioned towards renewables or a cleaner energy might be easier to engage in conversation, but it's actually the areas, for instance, like Alberta and Canada, that the conversations are the ones happening right now. And so it's not something that's been decided. It's not something that's still in the process. So as a young person, you have a greater ability to get involved in it and really just like have a say in that part of the conversation. So I'd say there's a lot more opportunities to engage. Brett, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think just in terms of the engagement perspective, I think that in regions that are a little bit more strongly tied to natural resource extraction, it can feel scary as someone who's focused within the green space to be advocating and discussing those perspectives and the need that we're seeing to move forward in the just transition. But residing in Alberta right now, I can say that finding commonalities between folks and what everyone kind of shares is a great starting point for that, and is a great opportunity to be thinking about new employment opportunities and moving and pushing those pieces forward and using that as an opportunity to network. even if it is a conversation with a more traditional energy focus, you can certainly expand your network in that region.
Thanks, Brett. I don't know, Anna, if you want to add anything to it before you take the floor or the screen.
Thank you, thank you. Well, actually, it's a very interesting question, and it fits in a lot. Susanna, you probably know of what I will say probably next. I don't know if I mean, I can always start my presentation and reply to this, because it's already in the beginning that I kind of touch upon this topic, because of course, like Piper and Brett said, it's a complex topic, also related to opportunities and discussion of opportunities. So, and it's not a topic every region, and then we'll talk about it later, is somehow unique and needs to be looked at for like the opportunities that and the specificities of the region. So I will just open my presentation, and then let me know if you can.
Thanks, Anna. I don't know if there are
Yeah.
any burning questions now for student energy before we move on to
Yeah.
Anna. Katerina, do you have anything? I saw you raised your hand. You lowered it.
There was a question in the chat, but I see that Piper already got to
Right.
it and answered it there. So.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let me know. Otherwise, I wait a bit. But
Any more
well,
questions? Or of course, we can also ask in the end, and we can move on to Anna. And you can also just put them on the chat box, and we can do what we're doing now, just interacting simultaneously. So if there are no questions now, Anna, screen is
Okay.
yours.
Let me.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on your vacation, I think, or leave.
Yeah, on my leave, but it's always a pleasure to hear multiple sides of this topic. So for those of you, some of you know me, so Susanna knows me because we actually somehow work together in a very broad sense of the word. I work at the Directorate General for Regional and Urban Policy in the European Commission. And mainly what I do is shared management of EU funding programs in Portugal in particular. And of course, now we have a new fund called the Just Transition Fund, which I will get to later. And this is how my aspect, let's say, my link to employment and skills in my work is kind of brought to center stage, because it was not, our focus was not so much on the skills aspect, but this is intrinsically linked one to the other. So I think we all agreed that there's, of course, an urgent need to reach climate neutrality. And also we're seeing this, I mean, the direct consequences of this, I mean, just in 2022 was the second warmest year on record for Europe. And this is why the green transition was brought really to the center stage of the European Commission's actions. So through the European Green Deal, which is seen as Europe's also new growth strategy. So at EU level, we have committed to reaching climate neutrality by 2050. To be on a pathway to reach this goal, we have also jointly committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 55% in 2030 compared to 1990 levels. As was already discussed, this requires, of course, significant efforts, not only from policymakers, but companies, the whole economy, citizens, and all stakeholders, basically. And along with the green transition, for us, it's also equally important that it is a fair one. So one that leaves no one behind. And I think this is where the skills and employment aspects of the green transition come in. So having a workforce with in-demand skills is important, of course, to ensure the long-term sustainable growth of Europe and also its competitiveness. I'm trying to pass. Yes, okay. So what this is starting a bit to set the context. It's one of the reasons, actually, the let's say trying to bridge the skills gap is one of the reasons why the European Commission put this topic on the front of its policy priorities. So this year is 2023 being the European Year of Skills, and also to stimulate this debate around this topic. So, of course, we believe that with the right accompanying policies in place, the green transition should actually create more jobs than it reduces. So really create opportunities while changing, of course, in some cases, the required skills within existing occupations. So I think the previous speakers talked a lot about the fact that green skills don't necessarily mean just in the traditional sense of the word, but also making existing occupations more sustainable. So we can speak about, when we speak about opportunities, the European economy counted 4.5 million green jobs in the environmental economy, so up from 3.2 million in 2000. So in 2019, 4.5 million. It's actually estimated that the green transition could create up to 1 million additional jobs in the EU by 2030. Not only in sectors that really drive the transition, such as the renewable energy sector, but also in other sectors like administrative support or legal, accounting, consulting services, computer programming, information services. So in a way, I mean, it's not only in the traditional sense of the word. This is, of course, reliant on the green, the potential, really. So assuming that the Green Deal is fully implemented and the targets are reached, but also that people have access to the training, to reskilling and training, and also that the labor and skills shortages do not derail the process. So it's also reported that labor shortages have doubled in sectors considered key for the green transition between 2015 and 2021. And that technical skills are in growing demand. These sectors include, for example, the electricity sector, transportation, construction, and manufacturing. But also, for example, the battery sector, approximately, the battery industry alone estimates that it will need around 800,000 workers extra by 2025. Some of the fastest growing green jobs globally, so from 2016 to 2021, have been, for example, sustainability manager, wind turbine technician, solar consultant, ecologist, and also environmental health and safety specialists. In terms of job creation, so we have an EU agency, a European Center for Development and Vocational Training, which forecasts that, of course, jobs will be lost in what we call the shrinking sectors, like mining and petroleum refining, due to the transition. But there will also be potential for job creation in sectors such as water supply, waste management, linked to circular economy, as well as construction, but then of course linked to energy efficiency and all the necessary skills needed to create net zero infrastructure. And also, for example, renewable energy, electricity, and so on. Many of these additional jobs will be both for skilled manual and non-manual occupations, which usually require also vocational education and training. So what the previous speakers also talked about the needing to kind of have lifelong learning and training that is targeted more towards the labor market in itself. So vocational education and training, due to its strong links to the labor market, plays therefore a key role in the green transition. This concerns both young people, so still initial vocational education training after leaving secondary school, as well as reskilling and upskilling the existing workforce, particularly the workers who will need to move from jobs in traditional fossil fuel-based industries to sectors where the green transition will create additional jobs. So of course, this also depends on the transferability of the existing skills and in terms of like what will be needed to really reskill, the amount of reskilling and upskilling that will be needed. I will speak a bit later about the EU funding available for this purpose, but what I wanted to touch upon is exactly this slide, because I think it answers, well, it starts to answer a little bit. Of course, it's not the answer, but that in fact, when we consider job availability, it's also dependent, of course, and region specific and country specific, in the sense that the dependency, like some regions are of course more dependent, and a greater employment share of that region is reliant on, let's say, the more traditional fossil fuel based industries and energy intensive industries. And the economic opportunities and the diversification of the economy, which I will get to later, is also sometimes something that needs to be considered alongside training. So you need to also, in some cases, create new job opportunities in some regions. And I think towards the end, I will focus more on the Just Transition Fund and the plans linked there too. And then this will hopefully illustrate a bit more what I mean. So in terms of EU level action, at EU level, the Council recently adopted recommendations on ensuring skills for the green transition, which set the scene for EU action in this policy area. For example, the recommendation on ensuring a fair transition towards climate neutrality includes specific policy guidance on education, training, and lifelong learning, such as to integrate the employment and social aspects of the green transition, including potential labor shortages, in the development and implementation of the relevant national strategies. And what this means is also integrating these aspects in different also sectoral strategies of national energy and climate plans, or even other relevant strategies. But it's also to, at the same time, develop up-to-date labor market and skills intelligence and foresight. So being able to forecast and identify the skills needs in reality. However, as you can imagine, since education and training policy is foremost a national competence, the Commission's policy action at EU level has focused really on three pillars. So supporting member states in the EU to equip people with the skills for the green transition, developing analytical tools that would help better understand and monitor the skills for the green transition, but also providing financial support, so to the development of skills for the green transition through EU funding. And I won't have time to go through all of them, but I wanted to just give an overview that I think, and touch upon some aspects that I think could be relevant. There are several trainings and skills-oriented knowledge available to take advantage of. So this presentation, I've put the links to all these to all the websites, so you can of course look further. I wanted to highlight the Pact for Skills. So the Commission has been mobilizing and incentivizing public and private stakeholders in EU member states to take concrete action for upskilling and reskilling of people of working age in specific industrial ecosystems. So really by sector as well. And as well, the European Education Area Working Group on Vocational Education Training and the Green Transition, which brings together representatives from EU member states and candidate countries, as well as other stakeholders such as social partners, to enable technical exchanges. So how to integrate the green transition into vocational and educational training systems. In June 2023, the group actually published a compendium which gathers inspiring practices for greening VET in different areas and presents lessons and best practices. I think the key challenge, also the second challenge, is really what Peggy touched upon, and also the previous speakers, which is a search for a definition, skills for the green transition. And I think we are all kind of aligned more or less on what this means. So the challenge is that there is no consensual definition, of course, of what green skills or skills for the green transition are, nor a common terminology. But we refer, I mean, at least in the Commission, really to skills for the green transition, because many skills are not green by definition, but it depends really on their use, whether they contribute, of course, to a more sustainable world or sustainable practices. So some along with some international partners like the OECD, UNESCO, and the International Labour Organization, the Commission agreed on a definition of skills for the green transition as, and we can read it, but includes skills and competence, but also knowledge, abilities, values, and attitudes needed to live, work, and act in resource efficient and sustainable economies and societies. And these are, of course, two types. So the technical skills required to adapt and implement standards, processes, service, and products technologies to protect ecosystems and biodiversity, to reduce energy, materials, and water consumption. And these technical skills can be occupation specific, but also cross-sectoral. And then there's also the transversal skills linked to sustainable thinking and acting, which is relevant to work in all economic sectors and occupations. And the second aspect that I mentioned earlier were the tools that the Commission has developed to help support member states also to reach a common understanding on the skills needed for a green transition. I won't go through all of them. I'll focus on the ESCO classification, but there are also others that I invite you to have a look at. So the Blueprint Alliances provides insights on how the green transition is likely to affect jobs and skills needed at sectoral level. So, and the work from these alliances actually feeds into one of the other tools I will mention in my presentation, which is the skills intelligence tool. So the ESCO taxonomy, which is the middle one, is actually the European Skills, Competence, Qualification, and Occupations taxonomy, and it's a sort of works as a dictionary to describe and identify and classify professional occupations and skills relevant for the EU labor market and education and training also. Those concepts and relationships between them can then be understood by electronic systems, which allows different online platforms to use ESCO for services like matching job seekers to jobs on the basis of their skills, suggesting also training for people who want to reskill or upskill and so forward. The ESCO classification already plays a central role as the European taxonomy of skills and occupations, not only because it offers a common language, but also it provides the relationships between the skills. There was actually a release of an updated version of this classification, which has now integrated the option to be able to filter. So I put the link here to where you can have a look afterwards, but to filter by skill, by concept type, so by skill, and also the type of skill, if it's cross-sectoral or occupation specific, but also now have a particular filtering option for green skills. And the EXO taxonomy of skills for the green transition, which was updated in 2022, identifies around 381 skills, 185 knowledge concepts, and 5 transversal skills considered most relevant for a greener labor market. So these skills include, for example, skills such as how to integrate biogas energy in buildings, how to research locations for wind farms, or how to advise on soil and water protection. And it can also be grouped, and here I include some results from this work, to show the distribution of green concepts and skills, knowledge, and transversal skills. For example, for the skills hierarchy, about half of these skills are part of the skills groups related to information skills. So for example, monitor radiation levels, conduct energy audits, measure sustainability of tourism activities, or even communication. So collaboration and creativity, which includes, for example, train staff on recycling program, design heat pump installations, and so on. I need to move a bit faster. So the second tool I wanted to talk about, which relates very much to what Peggy was saying in the beginning, related to skills mismatches, is the Skills Intelligence, or EU Skills Panorama, which is an online tool providing central access to data, information, and intelligence on skills needs in occupations, sectors, but also by country. So it also provides information by policy themes, and it gives a European perspective on trends for skill supply and demand, and also the mismatches. And it's linked to national data and sources as well. So there's a lot to explore. I kind of filtered a bit just to show a bit what kind of information you could find on this platform. But for example, you can also see kind of projections for future employment growth across countries, and also by sector. And you see the differences. But you can also this tool also integrates to information from the EU agency's online job advertisements analysis. So according to this analysis, it also identifies what job seekers are looking for. And there has been the agency's foresight suggests that many different types of jobs support the green transition, and they actually have no color, or they're not green. It's not only about the let's say high level engineering and research skills, but also the management skills, data analytics skills, critical thinking abilities, as well as soft skills, which are, I mean, transferable skills that you also need. That would help citizens and companies to think and act greener. However, the questions also, skill shortages and skill mismatches need to be tackled holistically, and of course need to be accompanied parallel by upscaling, training. So we've heard a lot about this. And also better matching skills to jobs, as well as working on the supply side, so to invest in and provide quality jobs. And this is my the last aspect I wanted to touch upon. So it's what the EU is doing to support actually both the training side, but also the supply side. The EU supports member states by encouraging investments in skills for the green transition through unprecedented funding. So the Just Transition Fund was developed exactly for this purpose. However, it's clear that there's no one size fits all solution when it comes to policy making, because also every country and region is unique in terms of their and have territorial specificities. And we always advocate for developing policies that take into account the specificities of different territories at national, regional, and even local levels, but also that engage various stakeholders and in the discussion, including youth, of course. This transition, the concentration of extractive industries poses a significant challenge to territories that are highly reliant on such industries. So these territories will be required to restructure and diversify their economy whilst maintaining social cohesion, but also to retrain their workers and youth to prepare them for future jobs. And this is exactly where the Just Transition Fund comes in. The Just Transition Fund is part of EU cohesion policy programs. So every member state has, for the 21-27 period, recently approved their cohesion policy programs. And these programs aim to strengthen economic, social, and territorial cohesion within the European Union. So correcting imbalances between countries, regions, while also delivering on the Union's political priorities, especially the green and digital transition. The JTF is one of the many funds that are linked to these cohesion policy programs. And it focuses on territories facing the biggest challenges in the green and climate, in the green transition. To be supported by the JTF, the territories had to justify their dependence on fossil fuels or greenhouse gas intensive industrial industries. And they also needed to justify their, let's say, the socioeconomic impacts resulting from the transition, in particular with regard to job losses and also to transformation of the production processes of industrial facilities. So our common goal with the JTF was clear. It is still clear: achieving the transition, but ensuring also that no one or no region is left behind. And this requires both decarbonizing and diversifying local economies, and supporting, for example, small, medium-sized enterprises to innovate and to become more sustainable, also creating new green jobs, let's say, but also ensuring the quality of the jobs and improving resilience to future shocks and to future transitions. In 2022, the Commission adopted 67 territorial just transition plans, which support around 93 specific territories. These territories are now, prone and in a much better position to deal with the impacts of the transition and also to plan for the future. The Just Transition Fund will provide support to all EU member states, but it concentrates, of course, in the territories and regions where the magnitude of the climate transition is larger. It's around, in total, 25.4 billion euros. And it supports a variety of different types of investments. And here I put the link to where you can also find all the data related to this. So the open data portal, and you can filter, as you see on the right, per country, but also by theme, what types of investments, anything from, for example, digital skills, adaptation, like training, upskilling, reskilling of workers, as well as work-life balance, measures that promote work-life balance, and of course, like I said, support to SMEs to innovate, also in research. So there's really a diverse, depending on the region, there's really a diverse set of funding opportunities.
Sorry to interrupt, Anna. We're reaching kind of went past time, so maybe if you can reach to the end and then save
Yeah.
some time for questions.
This is the last, I think the last slide. It's just a kind of video to kind of sum it up, and then we can open for questions if.
The transitioning to renewable, clean energy. This shift will affect the lives of millions of people, driving change across industries and communities, creating opportunities for growth, innovation, and for building a brighter future.
Today, Europe is facing huge challenges. We needed an instrument that would help regions make the transition without major social, economic costs, making the best use of innovation and technology, respecting the planet, and making sure that no European citizen is left behind.
At the heart of this transformation is the European Union's Just Transition Fund, mobilizing billions of euros in investments to support communities that are heavily reliant on carbon-intensive industries, ensuring all regions benefit equally from the climate transition. To help guide and navigate the transition, the Just Transition Platform was created, bringing together experts, policymakers, and community leaders to provide information on how to access the Just Transition Fund, as well as the tools and resources to support the development and implementation of a just transition. The platform is a hub for sharing best practices, exchanging knowledge, and growing partnerships between industries and communities, embodying the values of collaboration, inclusion, and progress, building a new, more resilient and sustainable economy by creating new job opportunities in fast-growing fields such as the circular economy, renewable energy, and through the promotion of greener, more environmentally friendly work practices in the steel, cement, and chemical industries. Visit the Just Transition Platform today and discover how you too can be a part of the movement to create a fairer and greener future for all.
Okay, so I had one or two more slides, but I think we can stop, and I will share these slides afterwards because it's related to other funding related to skills as well.
Thank you so much, Anna, for your very comprehensive presentation. I think it was a good way to sort of bring these two aspects together that we had before. I know we're a bit over time, but yeah, if our speakers are okay to staying a couple more minutes to answer questions, then we are obviously also okay at saying. If you have any questions, and now is definitely the time because then we'll be gone. So let us know if there's any questions or just add them in the chat box. I really appreciate that you stayed all the way through the end. Sometimes in sessions, you have a lot of fluctuation, people coming in, coming out, but you pretty much stayed until the end. So thank you for sticking. Yeah, if there are any questions now. There was a question that I think Anna kind of answered along the way, the question that was before your presentation. I think we can revisit that. And while you're thinking about it, and while we're still here, if you have 2 minutes, I really appreciate if you fill in this form. Just helps us to get a feel for what was your perception on the session, but also what other topics you'd like to see in the future. It's really helpful for us to sort of guide future sessions, although this project is coming to an end. We have other projects coming in now, starting also with these kind of open masterclasses. So it's really good to hear what your thoughts are on this. Yeah, well, I want to really thank you if there are no questions. Still here for a minute or so. Really thank you. Peg is no longer here, but I think it was a really interesting combination. I'm really happy with the session, actually. You know, some of the things that obviously I knew, but others were new information for me as well. I like the fact that there's these two sides where there's lack of entry-level positions, which is kind of something we already know from before, and not just specific to green jobs. But then companies are really having a hard time hiring and finding candidates. But candidates are there trying to find jobs. So there's this space in time, which is those 2 or 3 years where you're trying to get your foot in the door, you're trying to get started in your career, and you can't, because everything you apply for requires that you have some level of experience or skills that you have had no chance to have because you just haven't been given the chance to work yet. So I think we need to fill in this space. Of course, you know, the public sector has an important role to play, be it at the regional or the national level, of course, providing internships, providing skills, providing exchange programs. I mean, the EU does that, but perhaps needs to be more focused on these specific skills, with more incentives for companies to hire people that don't have yet 2 years or 3 years of experience and don't have all the skills that are needed. And then, of course, there's space for us, and student energy, because we also play a role, although small, but an important role in bridging those gaps, right? Bringing the skills and giving those opportunities for practice that are needed. On that note, I think Katarina already anticipated and shared one of the programs we have open now, which is called Lantern. It's actually an Erasmus Plus, so an example of using EU funds to leverage these skills at the EU level. So this is a call for applications that is now open. The project has a number of activities, including a Youth Energy Academy. It runs over 7 months. And as to, so it's a virtual program, but also has in-person elements. So in Greece and Portugal, and very beautiful locations on my hand. So it's definitely worth checking it out. And also I think that Brett and Piper had some programs that maybe you can share if you haven't shared before already in the chat box. Feel free to have them here now. And again, if there are any questions now for Anna, for Brett and Piper, or even for us, please let us know. I'm going to also share a little bit more information about the Lantern program. The applications are open until when, Katarina?
So applications are open until the 15th of December, so only a couple of weeks to go.
Okay, so now is the time.
Yes, so it's a good opportunity to check it out. And also, if you want to follow up or get a reminder about this call for application, just follow us on social media or subscribe to our mailing list, and we'll make sure to remind you.
So there it is, some information about the program, and more you can find online. All right, I see that Brett has also added the fellowships, and there's a lot more information. I mean, student energy, every day there's stuff coming on their LinkedIn. So I think if you check it out on a weekly or even daily basis, you'll find lots of stuff that is happening. Some of them, are global. So I think it's really worth checking. Thank you so much again, all of you, for joining, especially our speakers today. I really think it was an interesting session. We'll make the recording available for everyone and the slides. So I just ask everyone, so Peggy, Brett, and Anna, and Piper, to send the slides to us so we can forward them to the people that registered, even those that didn't attend in the end. All right, so if there's nothing else, Katarina, do you want to add anything?
I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.